Welcome to another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. And now, your host, live from England, here she is. It's Deborah Ruffini.
Greetings from England. This is Deborah Ruffini with another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show. Today it is my pleasure to be speaking with the lovely Cliff, a rare ray of sunshine amongst the dark clouds within a Christian Apologetics group. Cliff kindly reached out to me with regard to a post I placed, which consequently got me banished from the group. Cliff, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for being one of the kinder members of the group.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you. And I think member would be a loose term. We talked about this last week, but I enjoy those groups often for the deeper, more human conversations versus the ones that I think we're going to discuss a little more today, which come across more as bullying. And I still am shocked that the post that you posted got you banned, because I can't see how that any community guidelines would have been stepped over on that one.
It was odd, wasn't it? So basically, for the audience, it was unfortunately I can't retrieve it. So that's how I knew I'd been barred. But it was, I think, do you remember, Cliff? I think it was something along the lines of raising the issue of sort of theistic mockery and unkindness towards atheists, in that it does no favours in making God appealing.
Yes, what I remember about it specifically was the question of, is this useful?
Yeah. Right?
And that's what really intrigued me, because it actually made me think in the moment, if I look back on my journey, those types of posts played very little role in it. And in fact, I'm not sure that the idea of apologetics played much role in my conversion. But now that I am a Christian, I do find theology and the ability to make rational and rock-solid arguments about Christ to be a gift given to us. But I'm not sure that that is the vehicle by which people are brought to him.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so important. I mean, none of us are perfect, but it's important to sort of try and get it right where we can, and not deliberately try and not get it right. This, I think, is
yes.
It's we've spoken recently, haven't we, Cliff, about how, where you've so rightly pointed out that our bashing of the atheist is just not effective, and it's interesting. I mean, where do you have any thoughts on where the meanness may sort of come from? Do you think it may come from a place of pride, or?
Yes, I think it really is pride, and that's a shame, because that's the sin that God can't stand the most. When our role, I think, in trying to bring others to the love of Christ is to express that love and to humble ourselves so that we become a vehicle for that love. And creating these, while they may sometimes be a little funny or clever, memes that are mean-spirited, there's no love in that. And
no.
It therefore seems to me to be pretty obviously unbiblical. Like we weren't tasked with going out into the world and marginalizing and making fun of people. We were tasked with showing the love, being the light, and those types of strategies, if you can even call them that, I don't really believe that's where they come from. They're not actually intended to bring anybody forward or to meet anybody part way. They're much more intended to show which side you're on.
Yes, yeah, it's true, isn't it? And it makes you wonder if they, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. But it makes you wonder if such Christians are they actually thinking, oh, this may actually do more harm than good, or is it just a matter of getting one over on them? It's an odd thing to want to do.
Yes, and I think part of it may have to maybe a personality thing, right? Like, and this is something that the internet, and particularly maybe the most recent generation of social media has brought to light, is that these types of platforms, they give a space where that type of very direct, I would say overtly rude argument or argumentation strategies can flourish, and I suppose to some degree people like them. I mean, I was actually just scrolling through my Facebook feed, and then some thumbnail video with, so and so destroys these people over that, and I'm just like, I guess that gets people to click. And maybe I've been, in fact, I'm sure there have been times where I have been guilty of clicking on that, and so maybe that's it. Maybe it's the clickbait part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. Have you noticed? I'm just popping into my head now. There's been many sort of street preachers that sort of basically target certain people on the streets, and then they upload can be quite argumentative. Then they upload the clip to YouTube, and they quite often title it something like, this person mocked the Lord, and then look what happened. And that quite often I think is for clickbait. Oh, what's God done to this person?
And then you watch it, and they're like mostly just uncomfortable and minorly confused.
Yes, isn't it?
Really, it's not really. Yeah, I mean, I guess every once in a while they do show. That brings up a really interesting point, actually. Is as someone who for a few years, a significant portion of my job was marketing, or at least garnering attention for some of the things the business I was working for would do. There is something to be said about there is a front line, if you will, where you're trying to get some form of attention on what it is that you're doing, and I think it can be very easy to fall into the trap of big flashing sign with strange colors, which would basically be like a neon sign. That's almost what the equivalent of some of these memes are, I think. But the problem is, what kind of attention are you garnering in the first place? Yeah. And is that attention at any point convertible, or at any point, can you capture attention that way, and then down the line insert the love? And I think that's pretty clearly not the case. I mean, certainly if you're following Jesus' teachings, but even in my own life, I've noticed that it just doesn't work that way. No, that's right. You've mentioned the Christians that you've encountered, like in the flesh. They've fortunately been kinder rather than cruel, and that's good. That's nice to hear. Extraordinarily kind. In fact, I have a story from this past weekend I'd love to tell you if you have a few minutes. Lovely. Yeah, please do. So at the church that I now attend in Medford, Oregon, I would say about maybe 3-4 weeks ago, a group of, I would say, like 11 or 12-year-olds came to the service, and they had come a few times before apparently, and I hadn't met them before. But the pastor asked me to sit next to the young boy in particular, and basically just give him reassurance and kind of sit there quietly and listen, so that he knew that was what was expected of him. Yeah. And he did a great job and enjoyed himself. But at the end, I asked him, "Do you have a Bible?" And he said, "No, I don't." Oh. So I gave him mine, which nice. Has been kind of a thing that I've been told to do is to remember that the physical book is not the Bible. The message is the Bible. And so if you get too attached to the physical thing, it itself can become an idol. That's why true. I'm not a huge fan of putting your hand on the Bible and swearing over it, right? Because then it almost makes it look like you're putting your hand over a small statue or something. It can very easily transfer from being it's the knowledge that matters and the wisdom and the Word of God to it's a leather-bound book that's really nice and it means something. Yes. So I gave it to him and wrote a few of my favorite Psalms and some books I recommended that he read, and then prayed over. I hope that he does read it, and if he doesn't, it's not the end of the world. But one of the other congregants saw that I had done that, and then told the pastor, and then the pastor kind of asked me about it, and he asked me to come up in front of the congregation for a moment or two just to explain that a couple weeks later. And then this past Sunday, he just kind of snuck this on me. He asked me to come up, and he presented me with a New King James leather-bound study Bible, which is a translation I'd been looking for, with my name on it and a little message from him and his wife on the inside. It is the most heartfelt gift I think I may have ever received. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it is. It was just so kind because it
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so now I have one that I cannot give away.
Yes, yeah.
I just always like to have a few copies on me just in case somebody shows some interest or there's an opportunity to give it. And it was just because he knew that it did mean something to me. It was the Bible that I had read the most. It was the one that for about 6 months was always on me. But the Lord just put it on my heart to give it to him, and then not very long later, I received something even nicer in return out of the kindness of the heart of the congregation.
And that's how it often goes, isn't it? That when we give, we sort of receive, and it's a blessing, win-win both ways.
Exactly, and just that level of attention to each other is not something that I've experienced to this degree, to this magnitude, and to this consistency since my walk with Christ started about a year ago. So, the overwhelming majority of actually, I do not have a story of someone in the flesh mistreating me because I'm new to Christianity, or because they heard some of the things that I did before being Christian and became judgmental over it. So it's been quite a wonderful ride.
That's really good, and it's always nice to hear that. It doesn't always go that way, and it's nice when it makes I know our walk with faith is always our individual one, but it kind of helps if the assistance has been better, if you like. Cliff, how would you feel about sort of sharing how you came to faith in Christ?
Oh, I would love to.
Thank you.
So I grew up in a family that was anywhere from agnostic to atheist.
Oh, okay.
And the school that I attended from 4th grade through graduating high school was a nominally Christian prep school outside of the Philadelphia area. I'll just leave it at that. Not go any further in the names or anything like that. But we had chapel 3 times a week, and we sang hymns, and I learned the Lord's Prayer and the King James version, and never really understood what it meant. And so steeped in sort of in an institution that was nominally Christian and kind of reaped the benefits of the underlying principles of Christianity, but didn't propagate the theology or the doctrine very well to the next generation, or in congruence with the fact that I wasn't really listening, even if they were. But what I recall, that there wasn't a huge emphasis on it. And then I went to college and really went pretty much full atheist, or I would say religion didn't fit in at all, even to how I looked at the world. I sort of looked at it as I guess perhaps an impediment to progress, if you will. That would have been probably if I went back and interviewed myself in 2008, 2009, something along those lines would probably come out of my mouth.
Yeah. And
then while in college, I started to get very, very heavy into partying, particularly my last year and a half. And that included some psychedelic drug use and just incredibly heavy alcohol drinking, and going to lots of music festivals and things where people were basically, now that I look back on it, the best way to put it is identifying sin and then celebrating it to the fullest.
Okay, yeah.
I participated in that, and thought I was having a very good time doing it. And then I come out of that, and I had actually around the same time gotten a set of DUIs when I was around 20 years old, and that put me in jail for 3 months.
Okay.
And while I was in jail, the only interaction I remember having with Christianity at all was that some of the inmates found out that I had that skill. You remember hemp, when you could take it or gimp, and you could stitch it together in such a way that it would like swirl around or make a box shape or something.
Yeah.
Well, I had learned that earlier in life, and I figured out a way to turn the wrappers from the plastic cutlery that you would get, stretch them on the beds in the prison, and turn it into a string, and then I would actually stitch that together into a cross for anybody that wanted one, and trade the cross for mostly ramen noodles. Actually, they were very valuable. Yeah. And so I did that for 3 months, and I got out, and then right back to partying. I would say within a few months. There was a period there where I was in such good shape from being in jail, and I kept that up. But I would say that only lasted maybe 6 months or so. Yeah. And then around that time, I met who would become my future wife.
Oh, lovely.
Well, no longer my wife.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
It's not one of those stories where she brought me to Christ, and that's why everything is rosy. But lovely woman, and I wish her nothing but the best, and she's always in my prayers.
That's nice. That's gracious. Yeah.
We had about a 13-year relationship, and about halfway through it, I got really heavily into cocaine use. Okay. And that got out of control, but I was really good at hiding it. So the only real outside evidence for that was that I gained a lot of weight, which people always find surprising because usually you don't eat, but when you're using it, but when you're done, you usually eat way too much. And so I gained a lot of weight, not even realizing it. I remember one day stepping on the scale, expecting to see a number closer to 180 pounds. I'm sorry, I'm not able to translate that for your audience, but I'm 5'10", and 180 would be normal. Yeah. And I looked at the scale, and it was like 217 pounds. I was like, well, how did that happen? Okay. So I went on a little stretch where I got in a little better shape, but it didn't really fully click in. Now, that particular addiction lasted a few years, and I was able to get past it. I realize now with God's grace, but again, not because I had come to Christ did I move on from that. But the partying still continued, and the over-drinking still continued as well. And then this was after moving from the Philadelphia area on the east coast of the U.S. to the Washington, D.C. area. And while I was down there, I got a job that I loved, selling wine and teaching people about the intricacies of wine tasting. Okay. Specifically with an outlook on South American wine. And I did that for 7 years. And at the onset of the pandemic in Washington, D.C., liquor stores were deemed, what do they call it? Essential businesses. Okay. So we were open, but we didn't allow anybody in. And that was the start of going from working at that job in a kind of normal sense to obsession to the max, and just putting in ridiculous hours and doing anything and everything that could be done to kind of keep us afloat. In fact, people were drinking so much during that period that was one of the best stretches of our existence. And that's when I really caught probably the worst addiction that I've ever had, which was my addiction to work. And my addiction to just gaining my sense of meaning from my productivity. Yeah. And that continued for basically the next, up until I left that job in the middle of this year. Now, corresponding in parallel to a lot of the things I just mentioned was also just a continual onslaught of family tragedies. In 2019, right after I had proposed to my then girlfriend, we were planning on getting married soon after, and then my uncle, who's kind of the linchpin of the whole family, he passed away. And so we decided we didn't want to get married in the year that he passed away.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And then 2020 comes along, and so we postponed it again, and then again. In 2021, we purchased a home, and who would soon be my brother-in-law, was having some pretty significant personal issues himself, and so we asked him to come stay with us.
Yeah.
And he stayed with us, and his personal issues ended up becoming much worse than we realized. Essentially, starting around the summer of that year, he would just stay in the basement and be constantly drinking, but we didn't really realize the extent to which he was doing so.
Right.
And so in September of 2021, we got married.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we went on our honeymoon. And we believe that was when things really kind of broke for him, because we were his only connection to the outside world. And when we went on our honeymoon, he stayed in the house, but we're assuming didn't do anything but stay in it. And then Thanksgiving Day, he comes down where we go to at that point, wife's family's house for Thanksgiving. He comes down and he's basically yellow. So, meaning jaundice. And within a month, he had passed away from liver damage.
Oh, crumbs. I'm sorry.
So that was within 2 months of the wedding. And
all happened, yeah.
We thought, okay, well, this will bring us closer together and we'll be able to handle this. And I think that was true for maybe the first 6 months or so. But then it started to deteriorate, and my problems started to get worse again as well. And I put even more energy and effort and time, specifically time, into my job, and so did my wife. And so we became further and further estranged from each other. And then we went on what was supposed to be a much needed vacation, and that much needed vacation was with family. And let's just say it was it was pretty much a disaster from start to finish.
No.
And she stayed up. This was in the New Hampshire area. She stayed up to go on a long hike with a friend, and I took the dogs home. And when she came back, she said, I think this is over. I would like to get a divorce.
Oh, dear.
And she said something to me that really blew my mind, and I think was a huge catalyst. She said, I feel like this entire relationship has been your will.
Right.
And now, looking back from the standpoint of being a Christian, everything should be God's will. And I think that there's something to be said about just how much pressure the world will put on you if you try to be the foundation, if you try to be the thing that wills everything to happen.
Yeah.
It will eat you alive. So she left, and left myself and the two dogs in the house. She went up to her parents for, I think it was about 3 weeks. And within, I would say, a day or two, I can't remember the exact date, I just said to myself, I'm going to give Jesus a shot.
Wow.
I'm going to pray to him. I'm going to try and see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah.
Because I've tried everything else, and I'd already very much come around to the idea that there was a God, this world is created, this universe is created. I no longer found any of the explanations that I probably thought were, more than anything, kind of cool and hip at the time, in college in particular, to be very foundational and explanatory, and to really emotionally work as a way to orient my life. And part of this, I think, had to do with the fact that the brother-in-law that I told you about, he still maintained a lot of those beliefs, and he and I were about the same age.
Yeah. And
I could just see how, in his most dire moments, he had nothing to pull him out.
Yeah.
He had nothing to reorient him out of the to quote Psalm 69, the deep mire, right? Like he couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
And my experience, once I did invite Jesus into my heart, was that I knew I could get out of it.
Wow.
I knew I could.
Yeah.
And the changes that started to happen, not just in my heart, which I think is the most important, and that's how I know he's real, but also outside of that. I've experienced examples of God's providence that are, I believe, to be undeniable, especially if someone had experienced them. You can't not see them as so. But when I describe them to people, at least I can see it's getting some light bulbs to turn on. As well as a few miracles, one to me personally in terms of some of the health issues that I had from all those years of partying, many of them being either not reversed entirely, but very much alleviated to the point where they didn't cause the same type of stress that they had. Very, very rapid and really healthy weight loss. I went from around 220 pounds to now I'm at about 168.
Oh, okay.
Better shape than I've been in since high school. And as well, I don't know, did I share with you when we spoke last week the one about my current brother-in-law's nephew who had a blood issue? No,
I don't believe you did, Cliff. No.
This one's my favorite because I just it floored me. But my brother-in-law, who's also Christian, he asked me to pray for his brother's son, Easton, and I did so. And basically, I got this text saying, "Look, they did some tests, and it's really one of two really bad outcomes: either leukemia, or." And then he didn't know exactly what the other disease was, but he said the way that his brother described it to him, it was not something that they didn't want to go down either path, but of the two, leukemia would have been the worst.
Yeah.
So for the first time in my life, I spent at least 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, just praying consistently, constantly. Almost every thought and word that came out of my mouth was about asking God, asking Jesus, asking the Holy Spirit, please, help. And a lot of the prayers were like, it's your will, and therefore, if you're going to use this to teach him, please do, or give him the strength. And then one day I just said to myself, Jesus, I know you can do it because you healed my liver.
Okay.
I know you can do it.
Yeah.
No more of this like wishy-washy. Just please, I know you can do it. And a few days later, and after I said that, I had this confidence that wasn't mental. I still wanted to see the text from David saying, this is definitely fixed. It's no longer an issue. So mentally, I knew I didn't know. But something after that prayer, I remember distinctly being, it's just this deep calm. In fact, after that point, I didn't pray for it nearly as much.
Yeah.
And then I get the text, and they say the doctors don't know how. It's gone.
Wow.
The issue is gone. He's no longer. It's not going to be either.
My goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah, and I remember being terrified.
Yes. Yeah.
We talked a little bit last week about the fear of God, and I just remember being like, oh, he's that powerful.
Oh, okay, yes, from that perspective, yeah. He's
that kind, he's that loving, but he's also that powerful.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized I needed to start telling people, because until that point, it was basically a personal walk with Jesus, right? I hadn't told any close friends. Family didn't really know.
Yeah.
I had told a couple of family members, but I still don't, I would say, wear it on my sleeve per se, but I will talk to anybody who wants to talk about Jesus, as long as they want, and meet them at whatever level they want to meet. But that's when I realized, this is something I have to share, because this is incredible. And if he's able to do this, and I already had believed everything that I'm reading in the Bible, I'm like, this whole idea of good news, this is some really good news.
Yeah.
This is the news that we all need to hear. That's my story. And then for I would say the last 5 to 6 months or so, everything has been reoriented. I, with the Spirit's help, have reoriented everything towards God and Jesus. And
wow.
It's been wonderful. It's been full 180.
That's beautiful. And do you know what? Just listening to you there, Cliff, that's really interesting, because I think sometimes, it can sort of like it can mean more or be more effective if it's like a personal experience rather than like a head knowledge or a teaching. And I think with all that's happened to you, and like you say, you feel free to speak about it where you can rather than sort of push it. And I think that's what it's all about. It's sort of like, okay, this happened to me. I want to talk about this. And that's different, isn't it? In sort of introducing people to the gospel and saying, this is what happened to me, rather than giving someone instructions or laws and I think that's, the best way to go. That's more effective, I think, to spread the gospel message.
I hope so. I mean, I can't say I have a concrete story where I can point to me being the end catalyst in someone's conversion, but I do think I heard somewhere someone saying, back to that thing I was talking about earlier about sort of like introducing people to things. If they hear a story like mine or are greeted with love in general, and then the excitement and the passion that comes with knowing that Jesus really is who he says he is.
Yeah.
I think that can lead someone down a path that is resilient. One, if they run into somebody who is kind of a bullying Christian or a proclaiming Christian who's bullying them, they'll say, well, okay, let me think back to the original experience that I had, or to that one particular story that did touch my heart.
Yes.
And then the head knowledge, I think, does become very effective.
Oh yes,
and
absolutely.
In my case, as I mentioned, I had already become intellectually convinced of the concept of God. So I'm fully willing to admit that may be a prerequisite. But I haven't met anybody yet that doesn't have some form of, I had to rely on Jesus to get through something. And for a lot of people who are lifelong Christians, it's very early. And in some cases, I've talked to people and they're not really able to articulate it anymore because it was so long ago. But that I think is certainly it seems to me to be a key piece of the recipe, is a moment, either severe or very severe, where you have to step back and say, I can't do it. I can't. And the more I try, the worse it gets. And that was very much my story. The more I tried to fix things, the worse the things got, because it was sort of a feedback loop where I realized I wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
I wasn't willing to admit that certain behaviors and decisions and thought patterns had to go. And then probably, I would say definitely most importantly, I didn't feel like I had the companionship of the center of the universe, if you will. I think most people without God make themselves the center of the universe, even if they're not willing to admit it.
Yes, yeah. And I think also with an experience such as yourself, I think it's kind of there's a difference, isn't there, between this is where I was, all these dreadful things happened, and it took me to this place at rock bottom, and then I cried out to Jesus as kind of like, let's see what can happen from this, rather than someone who, I mean, it's awful that these things have happened to you, but if someone's had like a plain sailing life, and they've just they've grown up under Christian ministry, and it's all been not a perfect life, but they haven't been involved in this or they haven't been involved in that, and I think sometimes I have known of a few people that they can sort of be quite more judgmental because, well, I'm all right, Jack, and none of this has happened to me. And I think people that have actually been there can have the empathy for others that are in a bad place, and they're again making the whole thing more appealing. I think sometimes that can happen.
It can, but I also think that there's a huge power in someone who has been through ministry their whole life.
Yes.
Whose heart is very soft and inviting from the beginning to someone like me. Because I think we mentioned this last week a little bit, but I love the idea in many, many cases, the cases it's been with me, Jesus talks about there's much rejoicing in heaven for the 100th or the 99th sheep that's reclaimed, right? But it doesn't work. That whole metaphor doesn't work if the other 99 aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're not loving and they're not being the flock and being led by the shepherd. So there's no place to bring that 99th or 100th sheep back to. And so both are very important. Yes, my story may help someone who's in a similar situation to mine, and maybe it rankles somebody who's been a Christian their whole life and never fell into the types of temptations that I did.
Yeah.
But the Christian that hears those and says, I can't really personally relate to that, but I know that Jesus is in his heart, and that's what matters. Is hugely powerful, and it's been my experience. That has been my experience so far.
That's good.
Pretty much across the board. Now, are there people whose inward thoughts I don't know? I don't know. I know who does, though.
Yeah. I think, I mean, they say with sort of like sometimes with counselling that if someone's, I don't know, maybe specialises in substance abuse or something, if someone's been there themselves, doesn't necessarily make them a better counsellor, but someone who can sort of feel with their heart more for. Sorry, I'm not coming out very well, am I? Do you know what I mean? Sort of can have more empathy, as in understanding. Maybe that's the word.
Yes.
Where you may be coming from.
No doubt, that's the case. In fact, another wonderful person I've met in my walk, and someone who inspired me to tell my testimony with as much honesty as I just did, which was more than I think I did last week when we spoke, is another person who's actually in exactly that situation, who went through about a decade and a half long struggle with drugs.
Yeah.
And is now a counselor, a very successful one, and very good at what he does.
Wow.
And he shared his story actually in front of one of his he goes to multiple churches, one of his congregations, and he sent me the video, and I watched it like 10 times. Yeah. Because it's just so heartfelt, and it's very honest, and it's difficult. I mean, especially with people watching you, to be able to say that in front of a group. So he very much inspired me to tell my story today to you.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's how it goes, isn't it? It's having and also I think, I don't know, sometimes I think we can beat ourselves up. We think, I was in this place, but I think God sometimes meets us where we're at, and isn't so hard on us as we sometimes may be hard on ourselves regarding anything, really. Do you think that?
He's very loving. Yeah, he's very loving. And
yeah.
That being said, there have been multiple times in my walk where he's used discipline. That's why I said earlier about the providence thing, where he's used discipline to say, look, you're getting off the path again. And what's interesting now is that I appreciate it, and I know when it's happening. I say, thank you for an instance where I was slipping, where you put some sort of serious consequence in my face so that I turn back. And now that I know what that consequence, where the source of that consequence is, I can have more confidence that I'm being watched and being loved. The way that God loves is, well, first of all, perfect. Because He invented it. And I believe all love flows from God, and this was one of the reasons why I had the inability to love until I met Jesus, because I had that stone heart, that I think Ezekiel talks about, and He came in and said, nope, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to replace one that I made personally for you, and it's of flesh, and I'm going to put it in there, and then if you ever forget that it's there, just remember me, and that brings the love in, and that allows me to actually, and it's so wonderful, because it fills all of the holes and all of the cavities, if you will, that I was trying to fill with drugs, partying, overworking, accolades, all that stuff. It fills that.
Yeah.
Because all those things are, they're Satan's counterfeits. They're Satan's decoys. Now, is it nice is it nice every once in a while to be told that you're doing well? My pastor gave me a wonderful thing. Whenever you receive a compliment, say thank you, but please just praise God because it's Him.
That's not. Yes, that's nice. And these things, I think there's certain things that in our humanness can sort of bring us like a very sort of superficial rush at the time, but it's not an inner joy, is it? I think there's a difference between. I was talking to a friend the other day about sort of even thinking about childhood, that adults sometimes can lose that sense of. Oh, we're talking about playing. We lose the sense of playing, see a playground, and think, oh, it's wasted on kids, Let's have a go on that slide. And I think similarly, we can sort of. There are certain things that. Yeah, a superficial buzz, but it's not a filling of the spirit, is it?
No, in fact, I have a very distinct memory. So one of the things I did while I was still in Washington, D.C. is Washington, D.C. has this beautiful park called Rock Creek Park, and I would walk it.
Oh, yeah.
Especially early when I was getting back into shape. I would just go for this massive, I'd take the whole, before I found a church, that was my church. I would go on Sunday. Oh. I'd get there, early in the morning. And then I would literally go for at least 6, sometimes many more hours of just walking, and then I'd find a spot and I'd sit down, I'd read the Bible. I'd do my best to understand it, and then I'd get up, walk somewhere else, do the same thing, just over and over and over. And I remember one time, I can even recall, if I had the ability to paint, I could paint the picture.
Yeah.
But it was such a beautiful day, and I call them the downloads, but they're thoughts that aren't mine. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And I realized God is joy, right? That's all throughout the Bible. What that means is that when you're feeling like this pure joy that I'm actually feeling is something that I had never experienced before.
Okay.
And it was actual proof to me that I did have communication with God.
Yeah.
And I remember being so just elated in a way that I'd never been before. But I also thought there was a little bit of underlying melancholy, thinking, one, I know I've never felt this before. Or I know that I hadn't felt this until I asked Jesus into my life. And two, that means there's a lot of people that haven't actually felt real joy.
Yes, yeah.
We're using the word joy incorrectly.
Yeah.
To basically, I think, as a blanket term for what you're talking about, which is much more about like, oh, well, I mean, I guess in modern materialist ways of describing it, well, it's a dopamine drop or something like that.
Oh, don't get me started. Yeah.
It's something so much more.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to be a part of someone else's journey to Christ, because it's so wonderful.
I'm sure you will, and even just listening to you is a blessing to me, because I think I mentioned I do have the faith, but it's like I say it's mustard seed faith, so it's kind of quite small, but I know it's there, and it's encouraging to hear, people like yourself, and I think you may be surprised how many people you are blessing along the way, and I think quite often it's not recognised, and just sharing of your walk and sharing of your experiences. I think that's the most effective way to, and of Jesus, the most effective way to touch people, and I think it's we need more humble servants of the Lord like you, dear man. I think it's it's what it's all about, really. It's getting it right and doing it in a nice way, pleasing to God way.
Pleasing God, yes.
Yeah, I think that's
the humble part, and the word meek is such a wonderful word, because it's another one that's been hijacked by the culture just because it sounds like the word weak.
Yes, actually, yes, that's true.
It's a lovely word that I think encapsulates the whole thing, which is be strong and confident in your faith, but in all manner that you can, just push away the pride, kill the pride.
Yeah,
because it's not me.
Yeah.
It's not me doing it. because I know what me does.
Yeah.
I want to avoid that. It's all God.
We could have done with you running that apologetics group. I think the membership would have soared. But yeah, no, it's Cliff, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and thanks for sharing and talking with us. It's a real blessing, and may God continue to bless you in your walk with Him. And
thank you so much. God bless you as well, and thank you for the invite. I can't tell you how much it filled my heart when I saw your response, because I remember sending it, and I said to God, this really, I would love to do this. If you can find a way to make it happen, please do. And then I remember seeing I don't get many notifications on Facebook, so I said, that's either Meta trying to convince me to use their AI for the 20th time, or it's Deborah, and it was. And so I that just brought a huge smile to my face. I've really been honored to be a part of this, and thank you
likewise
for starting the interview an hour earlier, because the United States and England apparently have different start times for their daylight savings time, or end times for their daylight savings time.
That was my bad. I know. I should have thought of that when Sunday hit, and I thought as I was turning back my watches and my clocks, I thought, hang on a minute. But it didn't.
You'd think they'd be synced to each other, but
yes.
I suppose that now that I think about it, how would that even be the case? Because we have this whole thing in Congress where they're trying to get rid of it, or at least they were. So now I know.
Oh right, yeah, it would be, because it just confuses everything, doesn't it? We're just all over the place, really.
Yes. Everybody should just if we're gonna shift, everybody shift at the same time and then back. But each is a sovereign country, right? So it should make its own choices. But it would be the more logical thing to do.
It would. I couldn't agree more. It would absolutely. But lovely. Thanks again to you, Cliff, and to the audience at home. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, lots of love and blessings.